Good morning or afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the GSA SmartPay Travel Management Essentials course today. I sincerely hope you're enjoying this year's forum in its virtual environment. While it's disappointing not to be with you all in person, I am glad that technology allows for us to at least meet virtually, as I know how important this training is to all of you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Erin Van Dagna, and I'm the Service Delivery Branch Chief. I've worked for GSA for many years, and most of that time has been spent working on the GSA SmartPay program. So now that you know me, let's get started. The Travel Management Essentials course isn't new to the GSA SmartPay lineup of training sessions. In fact, it's a course we've offered in some way or another since the first GSA SmartPay forum back in 1999. If we were in person, I would ask how many of you had been here since 1999, but since we are, I'll just have to let you think about that. Over the years, this course has changed slightly, but at its core are the foundations for running your agency's GSA SmartPay travel card program. This course focuses on the basics of program management, the GSA SmartPay master contract, important legislation that impacts the travel card program, and key players involved. But before we dive into those details, it's important to take a high-level look at the GSA SmartPay travel program as a whole. These numbers represent the overall picture of the travel card program in fiscal year 19. The travel card program has always represented a healthy chunk of the program transactions and number of accounts. While the travel card spend cannot be dismissed, it just doesn't compare to that of the purchase card program from an overarching perspective. As you can imagine, if we were to compare the FY spend to the FY20 spend at this point in time, you would see some significant decreases because of COVID-19 and travel restrictions. There has been a definite impact to all involved in the travel field, and agencies are seeing less in travel refunds. It's likely this trend will continue for many more months, but I remain optimistic that travel will pick up again as the world gets closer to a vaccine and people begin to feel safe traveling again. The travel card program and legislation are closely tied. In fact, when I first started with GSA, what feels like ages ago, the Travel and Transportation Reform Act and Public Law 105-264 were relatively new, and agencies were just starting to get their arms around increased use of travel cards. In fact, this program has come a long way, and truth be told, it's something that I'm really proud of and happy to have been a part of building up over my many years with GSA. I'll get into the details of this law and others as we move through this section of the presentation. Local travel is considered official travel when the individual is performing official duties in and around the area of the permanent duty station. I often hear from individuals that the FTR doesn't address local travel. This is actually because local travel isn't considered official government travel. The GSA SmartPay contracts take this into consideration, and language was added back in the GSA SmartPay 2 contract and as such carried over into GSA SmartPay 3 to ensure that use of the travel card is possible for local travel, provided that an agency allows for this in its own policies. Many agencies have created policies to allow for card use in this scenario, with DoD being one of the first to allow cards to be used in this capacity. Some key areas for review on this topic are found in the Federal Travel Regulations for civilian employees, the Joint Travel Regulations for DoD civilian employees, the Foreign Affairs Manual and the Foreign Affairs Manual, Volume 4 and 14, Chapter 460 and Chapter 500 for members of the Foreign Service and the U.S. Department of State. One of the best places to look for information regarding the management of the travel card program and even use of the cards is OMB Circular A123 Appendix B. I had the pleasure of working on this document for 6+ years. Beginning in 2012, GSA began working with agencies to update the circular. Some of you may have even been a part of that work group. A lot of work was done to create a more robust framework for the document. However, it was tabled by OMB for several years and picked back up in 2016, where it needed to be revisited because content had again become out of date. Several years of off and on working on the document to place where it really started to focus on internal controls and management, the revisions were finally ready for prime time in August of 2019. So just after the last forum, the updates were issued and agencies finally had the chance to see what was done to update the circular. Some of the key takeaways from the document include Chapter 2, which really digs into internal controls for program management. It also outlines new tools available for managing your agency's card program under the GSA SmartPay 3 Master Contracts. Chapter 3 was updated to include the Charge Card Management Plan, which would now be due to OMB within 12 months of a new task order that's placed under a GSA SmartPay Master Contract. Then, every 2 years after that, instead of being due annually. Chapter 5 now requires CFO Act agencies to submit their narrative and statistical reports to GSA by January 30th of each year. January 31st of each year. In the past, these reports were due directly to OMB. Additionally, Chapter 6 provides disciplinary category definitions for agency use. These definitions were hashed out and discussed amongst the agencies that participated in the work group and provide a common language definition for all agencies to consider. These are just some of the high-level updates that can be found in the circular, and I encourage you to become familiar with this document. GSA also issued Smart Bulletins 30, 31, and 33 related to implementation guidance and updates for this circular language. OMB Memorandum M1321 provides supplemental guidance for implementing Public Law 112-194, which many of you probably remember as the Charge Card Abuse Prevention Act. With respect to the travel card program, the memo points out the following aspects for travel card managers: to prevent an individual from being reimbursed for a bill already paid by the government, and to ensure that agency officials who approve or settle official travel must verify charges paid directly by the government to the bank. You must also make sure that they are not reimbursed to an employee or an employee's individually billed account. The law and the memorandum also go into further detail discussing ways to prevent the government from spending money on unused tickets. Agencies must verify the travel, meaning the Travel Management Center or the Service Commercial Travel Office. They must verify that requests are submitted to servicing common carriers for refunds for fully or partially unused tickets. And they must track the status of these tickets to ensure resolution. IGs will also conduct periodic risk assessments of agency travel card programs to analyze the risk of illegal, improper, or erroneous purchases. All executive departments and agencies are required to implement the Charge Card Act's required internal controls for card accounts. Much of what's found in Public Law 112-194 is also found in the updated circular language. The Government Charge Card Abuse Prevention Act is related to the last memo that I just discussed. In fact, it was the law that came first, so perhaps this slide should have come first, but this law came first, and then OMB issued the memorandum that I just spoke about to offer some implementation guidance for this particular law. So the Charge Card Abuse Prevention Act was passed a few years ago. The purpose of the law is to strengthen internal controls around the card program. The law calls for risk assessments to be determined and performed by agency IGs. It also included violations reporting for purchase card programs, so that's not related to travel, but just a piece of information for you. The violations reporting, as I said, is not required for travel or fleet card programs at this time. OMB, in coordination with GSA Center for Charge Card Management, developed the previously mentioned memo M3121 to help agencies implement this public law. When the circular revision was issued in August of 2019, it now contains much of the same language that's found in the law for consistency and demonstrates the importance of managing your agency's card programs efficiently and effectively. Public Law 105-264. It's been in place for a while, and many of you, I'm sure, are already familiar with it. In fact, I remember it from GSA SmartPay 1. The law mandates use of the government charge card when paying for travel or travel-related expenses. There are 3 exemptions to this law, and they're found in the federal travel regulations. But again, they are limited. So the point of this law, even though it was passed back in October of 1998, the point of the law is actually to encourage card use because refunds are earned when cards are used. So for this reason, the FTR actually used to state that you had to travel more than 3 times a year, and that particular phrase has been removed from the FTR. And instead it says thou shall, or you will use your travel card when you're traveling, unless, and there are 3 exemptions in the FTR. So they're pretty, you should be using your card. The exemptions are pretty few and far between, and they kind of have to go up to the head of the administration or the head of your agency. So it's not really something that happens too often. Again, just to encourage card use and agencies to earn refunds. So that law is obviously still in effect, and the FTR has been updated to just encourage greater use of the card. Moving on to the NDAA titles for fiscal year 18, sorry. So this is the National Defense Authorization Act, and specifically we're going to talk about Section 1806, and that's reporting requirements. So the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 18, it's also known as Public Law 11591. Many of you may already know it by saving federal dollars through better use of government purchase and travel cards. It's a long title. So this law requires federal agencies to report their activities toward implementing the requirements of this title to OMB. Section 1806C requires OMB to consolidate this agency information and provide a report to the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs of the Senate and the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform of the House of Representatives. They need to summarize the agency reports that come in. This particular title addresses the following 4 primary issues: how agencies are expanding the use of data analytics, what agencies are doing to improve information sharing, and how agencies are addressing improper purchase and travel card payments. There is another one, what agencies are doing to leverage strategic sourcing, also known as category management, with purchase cards. So again, that's not really directed at this particular training session. You'll hear more about that if you attend the Purchase Management Essentials. But GSA, to assist agencies in these endeavors, so GSA, to assist agencies with these endeavors, are working with OMB to form and co-chair an interagency data management group. So we've already formed the group. Actually, the first meeting was held in 2014. We had heard that this law may be going to go through, So in order to kind of be one step ahead and to really have our ducks in a row, we formed the data management group, which a lot of you may already be a part of. We formed that group and began meeting quarterly even before this law was in place. So we were well on our way to being successful in the 3 areas where Congress felt there were issues before the law even passed. So in January of 2020, GSA provided a summary of the reports agencies submitted to OMB for their review and comment. Ultimately, this summary was the basis for OMB's report to the House and Senate committees per the law. Overall, the report demonstrated that agencies are expanding the use of data analytics, especially under SmartPay 3, as well as working to share information amongst each other via the data management group, via our training here at the GSA SmartPay forum, both in person and virtually. So data sharing is definitely something that we've done successfully. Agencies are also addressing improper payments through training and program oversight. Again, this training forum, whether in person or virtually, is just one area where agencies are really working amongst each other and with the banks to address improper payments through training and oversight. So some additional information there. The last law that I wanted to go over is Public Law 11534. So this law was passed a few years ago, and it requires agencies to report on travel and transportation expenditures, relocation, and the number of official government travel trips. This law also paved the way, which is interesting, for travelers to be reimbursed using TNCs like Uber and Lyft. So this law, effective in May of 2017, was really kind of, it opened the door for agencies and individuals to begin fully utilizing TNCs like Uber and Lyft, and there are others, but those are just kind of the ones that most people know about. Okay, we'll move on to types of GSA SmartPay travel cards. Now that we've covered the laws that play a part in the GSA SmartPay travel program, we can spend some time learning about the types of GSA SmartPay travel cards. The most common type of travel card is the individually billed account. These accounts are requested by AOPCs for individual travelers. The individual traveler is liable for any charges placed on the card and is responsible for paying the billing statement in full. The government will reimburse the IBA cardholder for authorized purchases only. The card should only be used for official government travel or for local travel when allowed by your agency. There are 2 types of IBA travel cards, standard cards and restricted cards. Restricted cards are issued to individuals with a credit score below 660 or if a credit check is declined. These cards have lower limits and may not have cash advance access features. Split disbursement provides for payments to be made by the agency on behalf of cardholders. At the cardholder's direction, in accordance with agency policy, the disbursement is split between the bank and the cardholder. The bank receives a direct payment by the agency, and the cardholder receives their specified claimed amount. The rest of the payment, again, dispersed to the cardholder account or directly to the cardholder, depending on how they want it to be done. Large ticket items such as common carrier, hotel, and rental car charges are commonly paid directly to the bank on behalf of the cardholder, while other disbursements are paid to the employee. If that's what your agency does. Some agencies place large ticket items like airline and rental cars, depending on rental cars, on a centrally billed account. So sometimes those aren't even part of the cardholder's reimbursement package. So I know GSA, that's what we do. Our airline tickets go onto a centrally billed account, and everything else would go onto the individually billed account. And then from there, you can elect split disbursement for whatever of those items that you want to be paid directly to the bank, and anything else to go back to you as the cardholder. So it really just depends on how your agency has it set up. Split disbursement is an effective tool to reduce delinquency and improve refunds paid to the agency. It requires coordination with the bank to ensure proper payments are made by the government and properly posted to the cardholder's account. So if your agency hasn't already implemented split disbursement, which I think most large agencies have at this point, you would need a pilot test to just make sure the process is working before you actually roll it out and implement it with everybody in your agency. So that last statement is particularly geared at agencies that are smaller and maybe haven't already explored the idea of split disbursement. Most large agencies already have that in place. Moving on to centrally billed accounts. Centrally billed accounts, or CBAs, may or may not have plastic associated with them. Oftentimes these, and I use the word loosely, ghost cards, are simply account numbers that are used to pay for higher dollar travel items, like airline tickets or train tickets. I mentioned this before in my example. At GSA, our airline tickets, train tickets, are paid for with a centrally billed account. We do not use our individually billed accounts to pay for those items. So with a CBA, the government holds the liability, and the government pays the bank directly for those charges that are placed on the CBA. Only authorized travel-related expenses may be placed on a CBA. Again, same with an IBA. You really shouldn't be putting anything that isn't authorized for travel on either of these cards. A new card option or item that just came about under GSA SmartPay 3 is the tax advantage card. The intent of this card is to maximize tax exemption status of CBAs for things like lodging and rental cars. This card features both CBA and IBA functionality and was created to function similarly to the integrated card, if you're familiar with that. Instead of multiple business lines like travel and purchase onto one card, it's only used for travel-related expenses. The CBA portion of the card will allow for tax exemption at the point of sale because the hotel and or rental car charges are diverted and paid for directly by the agency, similar to a standard CBA account. Other charges, such as meals or incidentals, remain for the individual to voucher for and seek reimbursement from the agency, while in turn paying the bank directly or via split disbursement, depending on how you want to do it, when the statement arrives. So that is the process. It basically functions both as a CBA and an IBA. Your CBA items would be mostly your big ticket, like hotel, rental cars, and we, GSA, are working with the hotel and rental car community to kind of strengthen their knowledge of this tax advantage card to pave the way for the exemption process to be much smoother. It is a work in progress, I'll say that. So going along those same lines, there are agencies trying out this product now that we're officially under GSA SmartPay 3. A lot remains to be seen about how it's working and what, if any, improvements can be made. Like I said, we continue to work with the hotel and rental car community to educate them on the differences between this tax advantage card and the standard IBA card, and what charges go on there and are paid for directly by the agency always, and which items go on there and are vouchered for by the individual and are more individual liability. If you have any examples of tax advantage scenarios, or if you have found it working for your agency, please feel free to let me know. My email address and everything is at the end of this presentation. I'd be really interested to see how it's working. The good, the bad, the ugly, whatever you want to share, just to kind of see how it's working in the actual real world. Virtual cards are not new, but they're newer to GSA SmartPay users. This product is something that I'm actually really excited about and cannot wait to see how it is adopted into everyday use by government travelers. I'm currently working with 2 agencies, GSA's e-travel team, the banks and brands, to bring virtual cards to life. Visa has entered into an agreement with a company called Confirma to jazz up virtual cards and integrate them with the whole travel booking process. The idea behind virtual cards is that there will be a unique account number for every purchase that is tied back to an overarching number that is also unique. Think of it as a parent-child hierarchy. In one approach, the overarching number could be unique to each traveler, and any subsequent charges will also be given a unique account number that is tied back to the parent account. There are numerous controls that can be utilized to ensure that fraud and misuse are strongly discouraged. These cards also allow for rich centralized data and automated reconciliation in the future. So virtual cards are definitely something that's coming. I'm really excited to be working with the 2 agencies that have stepped up and are willing to kind of pilot this. And I hope we could get something off the ground and share with you all next year or later in the fall of 2021 about how things are going and the way that we've been able to implement this really cool feature that's available under the GSA SmartPay 3 master contract. Okay, we'll move on to roles and responsibilities. So now that we've learned about types of travel cards, we'll move into roles and responsibilities for managing your agency's travel card program. For most of you, what I'm about to say was probably already done many years ago when your agency entered into GSA SmartPay 1, into the GSA SmartPay 1 master contract. But for those of you who are new to the program or with a commission, board, or tribe that just started using GSA SmartPay, your agency must have an agency organization program coordinator or coordinators, more than one. Often, there are many of these individuals in a hierarchy, with level 1 AOPCs being at the highest department level, except for DOD where the level 2s are at the department level. There are also account holders or card holders and billing offices that fall into this sort of roles and responsibilities piece. Each of these individuals has their own set of responsibilities. AOPCs are the gatekeepers for the GSA SmartPay program within each agency. Some may say they are the most important stewards of the program within the agency, and I couldn't agree more. As an AOPC, you are responsible for managing cardholders, the travel program, and promoting proper use of the account. You also need to understand how to use the available reports and tools to ensure the travel accounts are being used correctly. You are the first line of defense in spotting fraud, waste, and abuse in the program. As part of your role, you may also need to be involved in resolving travel account issues and working with account holders to manage disputes. In many agencies, AOPCs also work to develop agency-specific account policies and procedures. Approving officials are usually the supervisor to an account holder. The term AO, or approving official, may not be used in your agency under the travel program, but if you're reviewing and or approving vouchers and looking at charges placed on the account, you're filling the role of an approving official. Approving officials are vitally important because they can spot potential fraud, waste, and abuse while reviewing a travel voucher. As an approving official, don't be afraid to ask questions of the traveler. If you don't understand why something is on a voucher or if costs aren't adding up correctly, it's okay to ask the account holder for additional information and to do a little digging. Okay, cardholders. So this form isn't designed for cardholders. However, many of us are not only card program managers, AOPCs, and billing officials, but we're also card holders, specifically travel card holders. If you're a travel card holder, you're responsible for securing your travel card and only using it for official government travel or local travel when allowed by your agency. You also need to report any lost or stolen cards to the bank and your AOPC. Cardholders or account holders must also submit a travel voucher to be reimbursed by the agency for authorized purchases. You must pay your travel card statement in full, as the GSA SmartPay accounts are non-revolving, meaning they cannot have a balance on them. This is why we say the GSA SmartPay program is the government charge card program, because no credit is being extended to account holders. As an account holder, you must also take initial and refresher training as required by OMB Circular A123 Appendix B or your agency-specific policies. Account holders must never use the GSA SmartPay card for personal use. If there's one no-no, this is definitely it. If your agency allows you to access ATMs for cash advances, you may do so. However, use of the card is encouraged over cash advances because your agency earns refunds back based on spend volume, and cash advances don't produce a refund for your agency. As I mentioned on a previous slide, you must pay your travel card statement in full. Unpaid amounts will fall delinquent and could result in your account being suspended or even canceled. I think this goes without saying, but never write your PIN on your GSA SmartPay card. The bank roles and responsibilities. The contractor banks are responsible for issuing the government charge cards in accordance with the GSA SmartPay 3 master contract and your agency-specific task order requirements. The banks must pay the merchants for the card transactions. They must provide monthly billing statements as well. The banks provide AOPCs and approving officials with the ability to view statements, payment history, and other account information. Banks also provide access to this information via electronic access systems and reporting capabilities. The banks are also here to help you, AOPCs, AOs, IGs, with audits and investigations. I can say that I've been part of a few investigations, and many have been quite interesting. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the banks are more than willing to help agencies with investigations and audits. If you ever run into an issue where the bank isn't cooperating, please do not hesitate to contact me or anyone from my team directly to ask for help, and we'll be more than happy to be involved. We'll move into best practices in the travel card management aspect. What I love most about this program is that there really is a community here amongst the AOPCs. Whether it's on Discussions with Dave or the quarterly AOPC meetings, the people involved in this program are always willing to help each other out. I've seen some of the greatest information sharing done at the forum as well. I know doing this virtually isn't ideal, and that element of information sharing is sometimes lost in this type of situation. But if you hear of something innovative or cool in any of the classes, I would encourage you to reach out to the individual for more information. And if you need anything from me, I'm always happy to set up a video chat. Between my kids' Zoom classes and our GoToMeetings, I'm becoming somewhat of a tech expert. Not really, but kind of. All right. The best AOPCs communicate early and often with their account holders. Sharing smart bulletins and newsletters are great tools for helping your cardholders keep up to date on any related information. I know a lot of agencies use FAQs on an intranet site, and some AOPCs even hold conference calls for cardholders. Whatever your style, it's just important that your cardholders know where to go to get information and who they can contact. What are some of your creative ideas for communication? Feel free to comment in the chat feature to share these ideas. Or if you'd like, you can send me an email or reach out to me via the conference platform and share some of your ideas. We're always looking for good ideas to post, or to share with during Discussions with Dave or AOPC meetings, and even if we're tweeting things out. It's always nice to have information directly from you and this community to share with everybody as a group. This next slide is opportunities for increased savings. So taking a look at your program and how you can raise it to the next level is never a bad thing. Talk to the banks and get ideas from them. Subscribe to Visa and MasterCard's newsletters to see what's going on in industry. Being aware of trends can help you scope out new and innovative ways to use the card or even cardless accounts. You can also do this by ensuring that employees are using the card anytime they travel. Not only is it required, but it will also help your agency to increase refunds, which can go directly back to meet your mission needs. Tax exemption is a tricky thing, and it's probably my least favorite topic. While I would like to skip over this section, it wouldn't be fair, right? So GSA does maintain a map or a list of states and their tax exemption status. We frequently reach out to the states to confirm their status is correct, and often we hear nothing until we break them down with constant emails and phone calls. While the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution does not allow states to levy taxes upon the federal government, many states have found a loophole in this statement. Most states consider the IBA card to be used by an individual and not directly by the federal government. Therefore, it is subject to taxes. The Tax Advantage card is meant to alleviate this. However, it's still a new product, and we're still learning at this point about how effective it will be. Tax exemption is important, but it's also worth noting that it's not worth a knockdown drag out with the front desk clerk over it. If the hotel will not grant the tax exemption, you'll just have to accept it. Make a note of it. Don't stay there again at that location if possible. My team does work with the hotel community to share information about the program, but it's not foolproof and doesn't always get filtered down correctly. So basically, while we do try to educate the hotel community on tax exemption and whether a form is required or not required, sometimes that message just doesn't get filtered down to the front desk clerks. So what I would say, if your cardholders ever encounter someone who either is not going to grant the tax exemption, I mean, I'm sorry, but there really isn't anything that can be done. You either just have to accept it and move on, or your agency can, try to file with the state for refunding of taxes, but that process is long, it's arduous, and a lot of agencies can't even give power of attorney to third parties to collect on their behalf. If you do that, then obviously they take their cut, and you end up with less. GSA did go down a path and try to pilot tax reclamation. It was so much more work than we actually got back out of it, sadly. So this is why we came up with the Tax Advantage card, and we're really trying to push that and educate the states on, what should be placed on the CBA portion of the Tax Advantage card, and then what would be paid directly by the individual under the IBA portion of the Tax Advantage card. So taxes are tricky. They're not easy to deal with, and every state has a different policy, procedure, and willingness to work with us. So I will leave taxes at that. This next slide, mitigating abuse and misuse. If there's one thing to be stressed here, it's training, training, training. Ensure that proper training is implemented and that your cardholders and any AOPCs below you are taking the training and the refresher training. It's hard to argue with a training certificate if your cardholder misuses the card. It's also important to emphasize proper use of the card and ethics. Consequences for misuse should be clearly stated in agency policy. Don't be afraid of salary offset either. Attachment 6 in the updated OMB Circular A123 Appendix B is a great place to look for the definitions of misuse, abuse, and fraud, and some possible consequences. And also, you'll need to work with your HR in this area too. Be sure to monitor card activity and lower limits on cards that aren't used frequently, or you can also deactivate them. Be sure to manage any delinquency and let cardholders know that you're watching them. So this slide goes, along the same lines as mitigating fraud, abuse, and misuse. So this particular slide goes into greater detail about the training requirements that are found in OMB Circular A123 Appendix B. AOPCs, approving officials, and cardholders are all required to take training prior to appointment or receiving a card. There are also requirements for refresher training that are also found in the circular. This forum is a great place for AOPCs and AOs to take training. Cardholders can take the online training via the GSA SmartPay website, or even some agencies have their own agency-specific training, both virtual and in person. Speaking of the GSA SmartPay online training, very exciting about this, but GSA offers training for AOPCs, AOs, and cardholders on the GSA SmartPay website. You need to register on the site in order to access the training. Level 1 AOPCs can also run reports on cardholders to ensure everyone is up to date and has taken training. Sarah Smith from my team, and this is what I was excited about, Sarah Smith from my team has just spent several months working to update the training on the GSA SmartPay site. It was updated and launched in July, so I encourage you to check it out and also let us know what you think. We're always excited to hear feedback from AOPCs, AOs, cardholders about the new training or any updates we do to the training, and any suggestions that you might have. Available reporting resources. All right. So there are a few bank reports that are beneficial for AOPCs, and I'll list them out as follows. But if you have any additional questions, just feel free to ask, and I'll try to get you some additional information. And don't forget, you can also ask for ad hoc reports. So if you don't see something in what I'm telling you, or you have additional questions, let me know. I'm happy to help direct you or to get you in touch with the right person at the bank for ad hoc reports. Account activity report. So this report consists of a summary totals for the reporting period, the fiscal year to date by card and agency organization. This report is generally used at all levels to obtain and manipulate program data. In the contract, you can see the account activity report for the travel card program, and that's going to be in the reporting section of the contract. So you can check that one out there if you want additional information on that one. The declined authorizations report identifies account holders who have attempted to use an account to buy an item for the following: something that they're not authorized, something that exceeds their single purchase limit, something that exceeds their monthly purchase limit, or from a merchant that falls under a blocked merchant category code. Pre-suspension or pre-cancellation report. This is important. This is important for AOPCs to be monitoring this so that you can be aware of cardholders who are, generally falling behind in paying because they're going to need to be notified. So this report lists accounts eligible for suspension or cancellation as defined in the account suspension and cancellation portion of the master contract and your task order. It identifies account name, account number, status, balance past due, number of days past due, and interest penalty for the CBA account. This report is generally used by AOPCs to flag cardholders and accounts for AOPC action and delinquency control. So I also have a note on this one. This particular report requires this information to be segregated by individually and centrally billed accounts. So just a heads up on that. The transaction dispute report. This report lists all outstanding and resolved transaction disputes and includes all information necessary to track, identify, track, balance, and obtain status on the dispute from an original charge through resolution. So this report must include all attributes of the original charge. This report is generally used by the Transaction Dispute Office to manage disputes. If you have a Transaction Dispute Office, that may also be you as an AOPC if you're monitoring that. So again, this information can be segregated by IBA and CBA accounts. The renewal report. This report lists cards and accounts that are due to expire, It identifies the account name, account number, expiration date, and any other information required to determine renewal status. This report is generally used by AOPCs to flag expiring cards. And finally, ad hoc reports, as I mentioned before. This is for agencies to, if you want to access certain data elements from the bank, and then you can create a specific report that's unique to you that maybe you'd like to see data a different way. So you can do that. And there are different formats for that. Again, additional questions on ad hoc reports, please, reach out to me, ask questions. Otherwise, when you're in any of the bank training sessions, you can ask any of the bank individuals and they can talk to you in detail about ad hoc reports and things like that. Okay, the next slide is account deactivation. This is very important for effectively managing your agency's card program. You may want to consider deactivating accounts that are not often used and reactivating them when the individual needs to travel. Again, sometimes some of this advice is better for smaller agencies than larger agencies. If you're an AOPC and you have, hundreds of cardholders, that may not always be an option, but it is there, especially if you see certain cardholders that really just aren't traveling a lot. And you can kind of either bump down their limits or deactivate them until, they may come up and need to travel again. I would also encourage you to work with your bank on this and see if there's anything they can do to help you kind of flag these cards and, figure out an easy way to get a hold of them and lower the limits or deactivate them and then reactivate as necessary. You can also consider closing accounts if cards aren't used. When an individual leaves an agency, the AOPC must close the card account to prevent accidental or fraudulent use. This presentation provided a high-level overview of managing your agency's card program. Hopefully, it was enough to get you started on the road to managing successfully. I do have some contact information for you. The following few slides are going to provide some information on program-wide contacts and bank contacts. So this here is the GSA SmartPay program information. Should you need to contact us or if you want to learn more about the program, you can visit our website. You can also follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. I will say LinkedIn, we are not as active, but we love us some Facebook and Twitter. This slide, you see it is the bank contact information. These are the direct numbers for customer service for Citibank and US Bank. You probably all have these in your arsenal already. So, but just in case, they're here for you. And then we'll go on to audience questions. But actually what I'm going to do is flip to the next slide because the questions are going to pop up at the end of this and we can have a discussion in person. So the next one, thank you for your time and attention. This again is the last slide and then we'll do questions. I hope you did enjoy the presentation. I hope that you enjoy the rest of the 2020 GSA SmartPay Training Forum. I look forward to seeing you again next year. We will be virtual again in 2021. We made that call just a couple weeks ago, just for everybody's safety. So we will be virtual again in 2021, hoping to be back in person in 2022. Not sure where yet, but hopefully. And, hope to see you at some AOPC meetings or discussions with Dave. And take care. Thank you.